researched out, and then put together. And quite frankly, and I know, Stan, you'll agree with this, it takes years and years and years to put together this kind of information, and at the same time put it together and show the trail of how and where this goes and what they're up to is, like you said, deliberately collapsing the international system, particularly in the United States and in Europe, to bring about world government and a world currency.
And I think it's really so interesting, unless you really can visualize it, what they do is they have the ability to create money out of nothing simply by the fractional reserve banking system, where they can expand massively this supply of money, but there's really nothing there. There's no currency behind it. It's all based upon your trust in the banks, that they have the money, but they really don't. It's fractional reserve. They may be leveraged 1 to 10. They may be leveraged 1 to 20. They may be leveraged 1 to 50. In other words, they're lending $50 for every dollar they have, but you're gambling that they're going to actually be able to have that money. The world, it looks like, has lost somewhere between $30 and $60,000, 30 and $60 trillion of wealth. There's some people, I think, have said about 57 trillion. I mean, the American people have lost a phenomenal amount of wealth. Those people who are in the stock market have lost 50% of their investment. Many people have lost 30 or 40% of the value of their homes. And people don't understand what's really happening as this whole financial system implodes, and it's being done intentionally. That's the incredible thing about this. And yet Ben Bernanke, of course, gets up there and has the audacity to say, only if we could get the financial system working, but the people in charge don't want it to work. They really want to impoverish the people not only here but throughout the world. And desperate people facing chaos will do almost anything, and this is what's going to happen, only I think it's going to get far, far worse. Certainly it looks like the economy, and Taiwan, Japan, China, all these countries are really having real problems, aren't they?
Well, they are, and I think the problems are quite evident, and I think that even though there are some positive things that are happening in China, they're very few, and the ability for China to surmount the problem that they have with keeping people at work, which is close to 30 trillion people who are unemployed right now. And, the figure, no, it's not trillion. 30 million people who are out of work right now is very, very hard. And they're talking about spending $568 billion to fix that over the next few years. And that'll soften things, but it's not going to change things an awful lot. The system is broken, and it's not going to be easily fixed. And that's what we continue to try to tell the listeners, because you must prepare yourself. And it's so important. And if you don't, you're going to be sorry.
Well, we saw, the tremendous number of unemployment. I think the unemployment figures for last month were about 680,000 Americans lost their jobs, well over 500,000 just this last month. And of course, certainly they got the $700 billion for the home foreclosures last October, and here we are 6 months later, and they said, just give us the money. There's going to be chaos if you don't. Well, I think a couple of 100,000 people lost their jobs, lost their homes just last month. And they say, well, we're going to really do something. You can trust us. We're going to actually stop foreclosures. And yet every time they do something, things get worse. And I think a lot of this is simply to give the American people the idea that they're really doing something. All the time they are intentionally not doing what needs to be done to solve the problem.
And they're still not. What they're talking about now is lowering the mortgage payments for people who should have never had a home in the first place, so that all the people who did the proper thing, they are being penalized. They are paying to bail all these people out. And it's wrong. And then, of course, at the same time, they're bailing all the lenders out. And it's wrong. And the American public knows it's wrong. And you have to say to yourself, well, what's next? We bailed out the banks, the big ones, some insurance companies, and also Wall Street. Now, we're talking about going and bailing out the owners of homes. Next will be commercial real estate. That'll be followed by those who can't pay their credit cards. And there's no end to it. It just goes on and on and on. It's absolute madness.
Well, because the problem would be if you had the money, you could somehow justify it. But when you actually have to go out and borrow the money to do it, when the federal receipts are actually falling, the amount of money the government's taking in and taxes is falling because people aren't working. Same thing is happening at the states and all across the country. By a county and city governments are having to cut back. But the big tragedy is so many of our major corporations have been cut off from funds, and of course you're one of the favored corporations, you can't get a loan. If you're one of the favored corporations, you can. That's how the game is played. And that's why, of course, so many of our major corporations, why Mervyn's and Circuit City, and so many of the companies, that were based upon debt, are simply being shut down. If they have a close affiliation with the ruling elite, they get their money. If they don't, they don't, and they simply go into bankruptcy, and then their stockholders go right down in flames along with them. And this is a great tragedy. It's a game that they played over and over again. And unless you study history, you don't understand that they did this. In 1987, they did this in 1980. But of course, the grand play was back there in the during the Great Depression, when they intentionally created the Depression. And even Ben Bernanke will admit that. But of course his solution is to do just the opposite, which of course will destroy the value of our currency. At least we maintained some of the value of our currency back during the Great Depression, because there was a nominal gold backing, although they doubled the price of gold so they could double the amount of money that was out there and cut the value of money in half. But what Bernanke is doing, and they've come up with over $11 trillion that we don't have, that they're dispersing throughout the world. And a lot of it, they won't even tell Congress. They won't tell anybody where the money's gone, because it's a trade secret. I mean, how can you be giving away trillions of dollars of the American people's money and not tell anybody where it's gone? Well, we can't let the American people know. Why they might feel that the financial institutions that were getting it weren't worthy. Well, I think the American people ought to have the opportunity to know. Or is it that they don't want the American people to know that a lot of this money is being sent overseas? Well, we'll be back in just a moment here with Bob Chapman, and of course we'll take your calls at 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295, right here at the Radio Liberty Network. Well, Bob, let's pick up the story. Have we heard any more about what the FDIC is going to do as far as raising additional funds? Are they actually going to raise those funds by of course, borrowing the money from the Treasury? Or are they going to strip the local banks of the money that they need to lend out even further?
Well, I think they will continue to raise the tariff on the banks, and the small and medium-sized banks that are solvent are very, very upset about it, and we've written about it in the International Forecaster. And I think that the federal government, the Congress, will give the FDIC $500 billion. And that's the figure that they've asked for starters, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to go on and on for the next 2 or 3 years, and whenever they decide that they're going to pull the plug, well, they're going to do it. And we won't know when that is. We might be able to identify it as we move toward it. But we've got to go to hyperinflation first. This is their intention. And in that hyperinflation, you're going to have deflation in assets as well. And the internationalists then are going to go and purchase factories and businesses and highways and all kinds of things for a pittance because they have money and create money out of nothing.
Right. It's a pretty
and so
good
they're going to go buy all that stuff up, and then they're going to pull the plug while they're having the Third World War going on.
Well, I just wish that you and I could produce money out of nothing by a fractional reserve system. Well, let's go to Mike, who's calling us from Santa Cruz. Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Hi, Stan. We can create money out of nothing. Lots of people do. They go to jail for it. But I want to ask Bob, when he talks about real power center being in London, is he referring more specifically to the Crown Temple?